It was midnight. A black jeep drove too fast through the dusty roads of Ouagadougou. Inside it were men with guns. They didn't come to talk. They came to kill. Ibrahim Traoré was not born into power. He was born in the dusty town of Bondakouy in western Burkina Faso, a place far from palaces, politics, or privilege. His parents were simple people, working the land and raising their children with discipline and dreams. As a boy, Ibrahim loved school. He was quiet, curious, and fiercely competitive. His favorite subject was science. He believed in logic, in solving problems. But his heart belonged to the football field. He played barefoot with his friends until the sun dipped low behind the savannah. Life was hard, but it was his. Even then, he hated injustice. When a teacher was unfair, he stood up. When older boys bullied the younger ones, he stepped in. One day, you'll get in trouble, his mother warned. But he didn't stop. As he grew older, Ibrahim saw that life in Burkina Faso wasn't fair for most people. There were too many poor, too many forgotten, too many voices lost in the noise of corruption and conflict. He wanted to do something. So he joined the army. The military was supposed to be a path of honor, a place to serve, protect, and rise. But what he found was a broken system. Underpaid soldiers. Outdated equipment. Orders that made no sense. And above all, fear. Burkina Faso was under siege. Terrorist groups swept through villages in the north and east, burning homes, killing civilians, and kidnapping school children. Entire regions became ghost towns. The government promised action, but delivered little. Troops on the front lines were outnumbered and outgunned. Traoré went where the danger was. He volunteered for missions others avoided. In the trenches, he listened to the stories of the people. He ate what they ate, slept where they slept. He earned respect not through speeches, but through presence. And slowly, something changed. Soldiers began to whisper his name. That young officer, he doesn't just fight. He leads. But Traoré didn't want glory. He wanted justice. He wanted to stop burying children. He wanted a country where people didn't run at night, where the sound of motorcycles didn't mean death was coming. He didn't know it yet, but the path he was on would lead to danger, betrayal, and power. And once you start walking toward power, it's hard to turn back. In 2022, something changed in Ibrahim Traoré. The war against terror had dragged on for years. Villages had burned. Mothers had cried. Soldiers had died. And still, the government gave speeches, not solutions. Traoré, then a young officer, listened to those speeches with growing anger. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a man carrying the pain of his country. He began to speak quietly to others in uniform. Men like him, tired, frustrated, and afraid that nothing would ever change. They didn't talk of power. They talked of survival. They talked of protecting the people who had nothing left. Then came the decision. A bold, dangerous plan: remove the president. It was more than a coup. It was a gamble with death. On the night it began, Traoré stood with a small group of loyal soldiers.
No cheering crowds.
No promises of reward. Only risk. They moved fast, seizing control of key posts, securing communications, and isolating loyalist forces. The capital city, Ouagadougou, woke up to the news: the president was gone. A new face had appeared. Young, calm, determined. His name was Ibrahim Traoré. The reactions were fierce. Some hailed him as a hero, a man of action when others had failed. Others called him a traitor, a threat to democracy. International leaders frowned. News outlets asked, "Who is this man?" But for Traoré, it wasn't about titles or headlines. It was about saving lives. That same night, after the streets calmed, he returned to his room. A plain, modest place. No guards inside. Just silence. He was about to sleep when he noticed a slip of paper under the door. He picked it up. On it, scribbled in rough handwriting, were the words, "You are a dead man." He stared at it.
No anger.
No fear. Just a long breath. He didn't sleep that night. He stayed up, thinking, watching. He didn't leave the city. He didn't flee to a secure bunker. He faced his men the next morning, standing straight, his voice steady. We didn't risk our lives to run away now, he told them. If this is the price, we pay it. And with that, he walked into the fire, not as a survivor, but as a fighter. Weeks after taking power, Ibrahim Traoré knew the threats would come. But he didn't expect them so soon, or so close. He was traveling to the north, a region battered by attacks, where soldiers fought without sleep and villagers lived in fear. He wanted to see the situation with his own eyes. His convoy moved carefully. Armored vehicles rolled slowly along the dusty road near a small town called Dibbo. Soldiers scanned the trees. The heat pressed down like a weight, but no one complained. They had heard rumors, whispers of a plan to strike. But they didn't know when, or how. Traoré sat in the second vehicle, eyes forward, silent. He had insisted on using a regular military truck, not the more secure one offered to him. If they target us, they will not care what I ride in, he said. Then, just outside the village, it happened. A deafening boom shattered the silence. The first vehicle, the one just ahead of his, lifted off the ground in a blast of fire and dirt. The shockwave hit the convoy. Traoré's truck rocked violently. Smoke poured into the sky. Flames rose. Metal twisted and screamed. Pieces of the destroyed truck flew like knives through the air. Traoré jumped out, even as his guards shouted for him to stay down. He ran toward the wreck, coughing through the smoke. Bodies were inside. One of them was a close friend, Captain Almaru, a man Traoré had trained with, a man who believed in him from the start. His face was gone. His uniform burned to ash. That bomb wasn't random. It had been placed on that road for a reason. And it had been triggered with precision, just as Traoré's convoy passed. A soldier handed him a rifle, scorched and broken from the blast. Traoré looked at it for a long moment, then took it in his hands and kept walking forward, past the smoke, past the wreck. If I die, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. But I won't run. His men followed. No one spoke. Later that night, he buried Captain Almaru with his own hands. No ceremony. Just silence, and the sound of wind across the sand. The next day, Traoré met with villagers and soldiers. He ate with them, slept among them, and promised not to forget what had happened. I walk with death, he said. But I walk for you. And he meant it. Leadership does not only bring praise, it also brings betrayal. As Ibrahim Traoré rose in power, so did the number of eyes watching him, judging him, waiting for a misstep. Not everyone celebrated his courage. Not everyone wanted change. The terrorists hated him, of course. He had become a symbol of resistance. But there were others, men in suits, men in uniforms, even men he had once shared bread with, who saw him as a threat. His rise had disrupted the balance. His vision for a new Burkina Faso challenged not just the status quo but the profits and privileges of many. Traoré knew this. But knowing didn't make it easier. It started with whispers. Strange looks in meetings. Delayed responses on radio calls. One night, a general who had sworn loyalty to him abruptly retired. Another officer left the country without warning. The circle of trust was shrinking. Then came the tea. It was a quiet evening. Traoré had just returned from a village in the east where militants had been driven out. He was tired, dust-covered, and hungry. A young soldier entered his tent with a tray, rice, meat, and a hot cup of tea. A guard named Issouf stood by the entrance. He had been trained to notice small things. That night, he noticed the soldier's hands were shaking. He noticed the smell of the tea was off, too bitter, almost chemical. Issouf stepped forward. "Let me take that," he said calmly, taking the cup and placing it aside. Later, the tea was tested. It was laced with poison. The soldier who served it never returned to duty. He vanished into the night. Some say he was taken. Others say he fled. His name was erased from the rolls. After that, Traoré stopped drinking anything he hadn't poured himself. Meals were shared with guards. Routes were changed at the last minute. He trusted few. But he remained steady. You can't lead in fear, he told his team. But you can lead with your eyes open. Betrayal had knocked on his door. He answered with silence and sharper instincts. The sun had just set when the gunfire began. Short bursts. Controlled. Not the wild chaos of terrorists, but the cold precision of trained men. It was near the presidential house, where Traoré usually stayed. Guards scrambled into position. Sirens wailed in the distance. Shadows moved across rooftops. It wasn't a random attack. The intruders wore army uniforms. They knew the layout of the compound. They knew the guards' names, their shifts, even which cameras were working. It was an inside job. But fate had changed the script. That evening, Ibrahim Traoré had gone to see his sick mother. It was a quiet, unplanned visit, something he often did without telling his team. He sat beside her, held her hand, listened to her soft voice as she spoke of home, of childhood, of simpler days. While he was gone, death knocked at his door. The attackers breached the outer fence. 2 guards were shot before the others raised the alarm. One of the shooters used Traoré's name. "Bring him out," he shouted. "Tonight it ends." But Traoré was not there. Back at the house, bullets shattered windows. A grenade was thrown but didn't detonate. The attackers escaped into the night, leaving behind only silence and the smell of gunpowder. One guard lay bleeding, whispering prayers. Another stared into the trees, his hands still shaking. When Traoré returned and was briefed, he didn't raise his voice. He looked around the room at his men, tired, loyal, and frightened. "This job is death," he said quietly. "But better to die for something than live for nothing." He walked through the compound himself, stepping over shattered glass, inspecting the bullet holes. He picked up a shell casing and turned it in his fingers. "They were close," someone said. He nodded. "Closer than ever." After that night, everything changed. Security was tightened. Guards rotated without pattern. Traoré stopped sleeping in the same place twice in a row. No one, not even his closest aides, knew his full schedule. He didn't retreat. He didn't hide. Instead, he spoke to his people on the radio the next day. "They want fear. I offer courage. They want silence. I offer truth. They want me gone. I am still here." And he was. Still standing. Still walking with death just behind him. It started with a sound, a faint buzzing in the sky. At first, the soldiers thought it was just a bird or maybe a distant motorcycle. But it wasn't. It was a drone. And it wasn't theirs. For 3 days, the drone followed Ibrahim Traoré's convoy as it moved across northern Burkina Faso. It flew too high to shoot down easily, but low enough to be noticed. No one claimed it. It wasn't from the Burkina army. It wasn't French. It wasn't American. Whoever sent it wanted him to know, "We're watching." His men were nervous. Some wanted to stop the tour and head back to Ouagadougou. Others said he should use a decoy. But Traoré didn't flinch. "We keep going," he said. "We are not the hunted. We are the hunters." At each stop, he got out of his armored truck and walked straight into the camps and trenches where his soldiers lived. Dust-covered, sunburned, and tired, the men stood to salute him, surprised to see the captain in person. He saluted back, shook hands, and sat with them on plastic chairs. He ate from their same pots. He asked them about their families. He listened. One young soldier, barely 20, whispered to him, "Captain, I didn't believe any leader would come here. Not in this hell." Traoré put a hand on his shoulder. "I came because you did. I won't ask you to stand here while I hide behind walls." The drone circled above. Still watching. At night, he slept in the camps, not in hotels or safe houses. He moved from tent to tent, never in the same place twice. His guards took turns sleeping. Everyone was on edge. But Traoré remained calm. One morning, a commander told him, "You're putting a target on your back." He replied, "Better the target be on me than on a village full of children." The soldiers began calling him the captain who walks. Not because he walked with them, but because he walked like them. No distance. No fear. No hiding. The drone vanished after a week. But the message it carried remained. Even the sky watches when a man like that moves. In a time when bullets came not only from enemies but sometimes from friends, Ibrahim Traoré learned the hardest truth of leadership: trust could be fatal. The closer someone stood beside him, the more dangerous they could become. One evening in early 2023, a close advisor, one who had been by his side since the coup, leaned in during a private meeting and said, "You cannot trust anyone. Not even me." Traoré looked at him for a long moment, then said, "But we must trust someone, or we lose everything." That single sentence became a quiet rule for him, not written in any book, not whispered to crowds, but carved into his daily life. From then on, he changed everything about how he moved, how he spoke, how he even breathed. He stopped sharing his daily schedules. His routes became unpredictable. Sometimes he would leave at dawn, sometimes at dusk. Sometimes in a military convoy, sometimes disguised in a civilian car. He would tell his driver to take one road, then change it halfway. Even his most loyal guards didn't know his destination until they were almost there. Traoré began using code names and signals. The only person who knew his exact location at any given moment was his younger brother, a quiet man who had stayed away from politics but had always been at Traoré's side growing up. To most people, he was just Abdoulaye, a humble man who wore second-hand shoes. But in Traoré's world, Abdoulaye became a secret compass, a living map of his survival. Each morning, if Traoré didn't send a message using a special phrase only Abdoulaye understood, plans would activate. Backup routes, emergency exits, and hidden safe houses would be checked. It was a silent system built on love, not fear. One night, as Traoré sat inside a darkened tent near the front lines, a junior officer came in with fresh intelligence. A meeting he had planned for the next day had been leaked. Only 3 people had known the details. One of them had betrayed him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't call for arrests. Instead, he cancelled the meeting, disappeared from the camp without a word, and 3 days later summoned the 2 loyal ones to a different location. The third man never showed up. He was gone. Whether he had fled or vanished by other means, no one knew. Traoré never spoke his name again. Yet even with this constant threat, he refused to rule with paranoia. He visited field hospitals alone, spoke with villagers without helmets, and sat by campfires with soldiers who had no ranks. "I have to trust someone," he told a journalist once, off the record. "Because if I don't, I become like them, the ones hiding behind walls, the ones who forgot what they were fighting for." Trust, to Traoré, wasn't just a risk. It was a weapon. One that could build armies. One that could keep hope alive. Ibrahim Traoré is still alive. For how long, no one knows. He wakes each morning not certain if he will live to see the night. His life is a moving target. His schedule shifts like the wind, no routine, no comfort. Each public appearance is a risk. Each handshake could be the last. Yet he walks with purpose, head high, eyes steady. He is not the richest man in Africa. He does not live in a palace filled with gold. His suits are simple, often dusty from long visits to the front lines. He does not hide behind tall walls. He is not unreachable. He walks the streets when he can, talks to market women, listens to farmers, shakes the hands of wounded soldiers. In the villages, old men speak his name with pride. Women pray for his safety. Children call him Captain with wide eyes. To them, he is more than a president. He is a symbol of resistance, of courage, of something they thought was long gone: hope. There are still attacks. There is still fear. But there is also belief that someone is finally trying, not from behind a desk, but from the ground. Traoré visits camps where other leaders once feared to go. He stands where bullets have flown. He eats from the same pot as his soldiers. He listens to their pain, their losses, their doubts. And in return, they trust him with their lives. "They called us forgotten," a soldier once said. But then he came. Many foreign powers do not like him. He has refused their conditions, rejected their demands. He wants Burkina Faso to stand on its own. He says, "Freedom that is given can be taken. Real freedom must be claimed." Inside the country, not everyone supports him. Some say he's too bold, too young, too reckless. But no one calls him a coward. And despite the assassins, the bombs, the betrayals, he is still standing. His enemies watch from shadows, waiting for a mistake. But Traoré seems to understand one thing: power is not in fear, it is in purpose. If fear stops me, he says, then the enemy has already won. Every day he lives, he gives others a reason to believe. Not because he is perfect, but because he is willing to die for something bigger than himself. He walks with death at his side. But he walks still. This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, the man who walks with death. The man who chose danger, not comfort. The man who said no to fear, and yes to hope. He is still walking. And death is still watching.